Hello everybody, Formula 2 headed down under for the first time this weekend, and in typical Formula 2 style, it delivered in spectacular fashion. This is the F2 show. I'm your host Fraser Ford, and joining me to review all of the action from Melbourne, we have motorsport journalist Emily Sands and Inside F2 writers Jenny Craig and Luke John Buckle. Coming up on the show then, Iwasa and Dennis Hauger were our winners this weekend. We reflect on their performances. It was an action-packed weekend. We discussed the key moments from both races, and we look at how this weekend's results impact on the championship standings. But before all of that, I want to start today's podcast slightly differently. Me and the team at Inside F2, we've been blown away at the amount of people that have chosen to listen to this podcast on this podcast player right here. The way you can continue to support us is really simple. Follow us on social media, get involved in the conversations that lots of F2 fans are already having. We really do love hearing from you. So yeah, just a massive thank you very much for your continued support from me and the team at Inside F2. It means an awful lot to us, and we'll continue to try to repay your amazing support in every way that we can throughout the season. Okay, let's get stuck into the racing then. What a weekend, by the way. So much to talk about as usual. First time Formula 2 visited the streets of Melbourne, Luke. I really enjoyed it, to be fair. I thought it was brilliant to see Formula 2 cars on the streets of Melbourne. Bill on Twitter kind of disagreed. He said, I can't say I'm a fan of Melbourne for Formula 2. The track surface seemed difficult to negotiate. What did you make of it, Luke? A fan or not a fan?
Yeah, it was great to have F2 and F3 as well at Melbourne. The racing was really good, and yeah, the Ford DRS worked really nicely. It was a tricky one with the long nights over the weekend, but the racing was good, and hopefully we'll see F2 return next year to Melbourne.
Yeah, definitely difficult for us viewers in the UK, wasn't it? Waking up at that time in the morning. Ayumu Iwasa was our feature race winner, and he leads the championship for the first time in his career. Was this his best weekend in Formula 2, Emily?
I mean, yeah, he had some good weekends last year. Obviously, he won in Abu Dhabi to close off last season, but I feel like this weekend was very consistent for him. He claimed his third F2 pole position in qualifying just before the red flag was come out, because we know that was quite a tricky session with the rain. Took pole for the feature race, and now he's leading the championship in front of Porsche. So, I think he's doing very well. Even Dams himself had a great weekend, and he even said in the press conference afterwards that he wasn't even thinking about, Porsche or anything like that. He just wanted to go for the win, and obviously that's what he got. He said that they were wanting to improve as a team, and obviously that did work. So he said that that's the reason why they have that double podium this weekend, and that it means a lot to Dams, and obviously to him as well, because he did get the win in the end, which is great to see. But I think, having Porsche there might maybe become a little bit more of a challenge. Porsche has said that he's aware that Dams are going to be really hard to beat this year. So I think maybe going forward, is Porsche going to, get on top of him on the championship? Maybe. But overall, I thought it was a great weekend for him. And it's just proved again that he is a really good driver.
Yeah, 100%. Jenny, is he a real championship contender now? This throws him right in the mix along with Teo Porsche and others, right?
I really think he is. I think he's definitely been, for me, the strongest driver of the season. And I think when Lawrence said it at the start of the year, we didn't really think much of it. But I think after everything that he's done this year, especially this weekend, I think it'd be a bit silly to count him out of it.
Luke, it's a good time to be doing well, especially as a Redbull driver as well. Do you think that Ayumu Iwasa, with a good season, he's thrown himself into the mix in terms of the maybe an AlphaTauri seat next season, for example, if Nick de Vries doesn't quite live up to expectations?
Yeah, I think he's got as good a chance of anyone of winning championship. He performed really well over the weekend, taking the feature race win, and he's had a good season so far, and he was good last year in Formula 2 as well. Then he knows the track's coming up. They're going to Baku next, and there's also Spa later on in the calendar. And he'll be putting pressure on Yuki Tsunoda and Nick de Vries, who haven't been absolutely scintillating in AlphaTauri. They've had their good and bad moments as well. And so he could be lining up on the Formula 1 grid in Bahrain next year instead of Formula 2.
Yeah, an all Japanese lineup at AlphaTauri, that would be something, wouldn't it? Yuki Tsunoda and Ayumu Iwasa next season in Formula One. I think we're getting ahead of ourselves, by the way, aren't we? We're 3 races into the season. Arthur Leclerc, Jenny, I want to talk about him. What a weekend, by the way, for him. He's now the highest placed rookie in Formula 2. He'll be very happy with that weekend, right? Double points.
I think it's really good for him as well, because we saw in F3 last year, he had the pace, but he didn't seem to put the races together. And he tend to start from the back, more towards the back, and then work his way up. But I think he's having a much more consistent season in terms of qualifying. And then, we're still seeing his great overtakes. I think he did really well to keep Bessie behind as well and stay out of trouble in the feature to pick up his first podium.
Definitely. First podium for him. And Downs' 20th win in the modern era of Formula 2. You voted them as your team of the round on our social media channels with 56% of the votes. Downs, your team of the round. Well done to them. Okay, sprint race winner Dennis Hauger. Peak Performance on Twitter says Dennis Hauger, driver of the round, 100%. Would have had 2 podiums from the weekend and been P3 in the standings as well. Oscar on Twitter says Dennis Hauger is the only correct answer for driver of the round. He was the only one who performed well in both races this weekend. Good, really strong weekend for Dennis Hauger, wasn't it, Emily? Just a shame about that last little incident at the end.
Yeah, the whole weekend was crazy anyway, wasn't it? But he did have a really good weekend, and obviously, I do believe, and I said it at the beginning, that I think Hauger is something special, and I think we need to keep an eye on him. And he's also a Red Bull driver, so could there be competition between him and Iwasa moving forward? Possibly. They're always gonna, there's loads of Red Bull drivers now, so they're always going to be trying their hardest, maybe a little bit too hard, like Fittipaldi sometimes does, and then makes those mistakes. But they're all going to be trying their absolute hardest to make sure that the guys at Red Bull are looking at them and hoping that they can get into F1 at some point, or even into AlphaTauri, as we've just mentioned. But he had a really good weekend, and I think that it's just going to keep going up because he clearly knows what he's doing.
Yeah, what did you make of the incident where obviously Victor Martins hit the back of him, Jenny, in the feature race, cost Dennis Hauger a podium? What did you make of that? It was obviously a mistake on Victor Martins' part, right?
I think it's just a shame for both of them, because I have them as both championship contenders. I think it was just so avoidable as well. It was on going on to the last lap. He's had the pace since the start of the season, Martin, but it's just these little mistakes that have lost him so many points. It's a shame because the ART, I think, looks quicker than the Dams.
Yeah, it's the second feature race in a row, Luke, that Victor Martins has made a mistake. Is he trying a little bit too hard? Is he a bit eager to impress? Is that the issue?
Yeah, potentially. It's a weird one with Martins because he's had so much good success coming up towards Formula 2, winning F3 and Formula Renault as well. We never saw him make too many mistakes further down the ladder, but I think Jeddah was the big mistake for him, where he threw away some big points, and especially in that weekend, Théo Pourchaire was sort of down the order, and that was the big opportunity for him to get some points back. And now he hasn't scored a point in both races in Australia and in this feature race in Jeddah as well. So he's a long way behind. I think it's like 40 points or whatever it is behind Iwasa already. And then with the tracks coming up, Baku, that's such a lottery in Formula 2. You don't know what's going to happen there. It's so unpredictable. And he just needs to get his head together and score good points. A good race, a good win could put him in a completely different situation.
Yeah, definitely. A shame for Dennis Hauger, but I'm sure this will be little consolation to him. But he was voted your driver of the round on social media as well, with a massive 81% of the votes. And he now has the same number of wins in Formula 2 as graduates Mick Schumacher and Yuki Tsunoda does. So, yeah, it shows the calibre of driver that we're talking about with Dennis Hauger. Okay, we saw an incident in the feature race where Enzo Fittipaldi, he spun off and almost hit the stricken car of Roy Nissany under safety car conditions. I'll be honest, Emily, my initial thoughts were, thank goodness there wasn't a marshal on track or a few marshals on track trying to recover the PHM car. Otherwise, that could have been a really nasty incident, couldn't it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, unfortunately, we've seen these type of incidents where marshals have been involved in crashes, in even local circuits in the UK and other circuits around the world, where marshals have unfortunately been caught up in crashes and things like that. I mean, we can look at Suzuka last year in F1. That was the same kind of thing. Thank God that marshal didn't get hit. So, it was very lucky that marshals went on the track, and obviously Nissany had managed to exit and walk off, so he wasn't anywhere near the car. But, this all comes down to the fact that they pitted under the safety car to put on the soft tyres, and where they've come out, we've been seeing it all weekend, even in F1, cars spinning out because they just don't have the heat in the tyres. And obviously with the F2 races, we don't have the tyre blankets, so we can't maximise that heat to get the grip when they come out of the pit lane. So, there's all these things that run in together that, could have avoided that, but it was fatal for Fittipaldi. Obviously that was, it's not the first mistake he's made. So I guess I'm kind of apprehensive going forward to see, what's going to happen with him. Is he going to be able to get some good results? Because it feels like he keeps making these mistakes, and even last year as well. But yeah, like you said, we've just got to be grateful that there weren't any marshals anywhere near that when that happened.
Definitely. What do you make of, we don't think we've ever spoken about this on the show before, to be fair, but what do you make of the fact that we don't have tyre blankets in Formula 2? Does it lead to potentially having instances like this where drivers do come out the pits, without any temperature in their tyres, and particularly when, motorsport, it's prone for drivers making the most of, taking a pit stop under a safety car, for example. If they are then going to come out under a safety car period and there is an incident on track and they've got no temperature in their tyres, do you think that therefore not having tyre blankets is a little bit dangerous at points, or was it just a really unfortunate incident at the weekend?
No, I think it is dangerous. I don't know the technicalities behind it. I understand that even in Formula 1, they're talking about getting rid of the tyre blankets for next year because they're going to have different tyres again. But, to me, how much difference does it make? Like, we've obviously seen how much difference they make because they need the grip. And these things will happen if they can't regulate that tyre temperature. And you've also got to think, the F2 cars are completely different to Formula 1 and Formula 3. So, we know that they're awful to drive. The drivers say it themselves. We know that they're prone to spinning out on cold tyres. So when you've got to try and get that heat back in the tyres, especially at a street race as well, where it's very narrow, it is dangerous. So maybe that might be a conversation that might come up in the future.
Yeah, definitely. It's potentially a learning from this weekend, maybe. Disappointing weekend for Enzo Fittipaldi, wasn't it? Let's hope he bounces back, and Carlin need a strong weekend as well. Okay, Frederick Vesti, really strong weekend for him down under. Sarah on Twitter says, if there had been a driver of the day in Formula 2 on Sunday, it would have gone to Frederick Vesti. Good weekend for him again, wasn't it, Jenny?
I wouldn't go as far to say that he's a championship contender yet. Until he can put together a season, if he's still going this strong by round 5 or round 6, that's when I'd say he could definitely be a championship contender. But I think the likes of Porsche, Hauger and Iwasa, like we've already said, are looking really, really strong. But it is only round 3, so I wouldn't count him fully out yet.
So many races left and so many drivers for me that I think could potentially win the title, right? I mean, you look at Victor Martins, we haven't mentioned drivers like Ollie Behrman. I mean, showed he's got the race pace in every race so far this season, but just hasn't quite put a race together. He's been so unlucky, hasn't he? And there's even more drivers that probably Zane Maloney, Isaac Hadjar, for example. So many drivers that, I'm sure there's more we're missing as well. I want to talk about Isaac Hadjar. A much better weekend for High Tech in Melbourne. Obviously, Isaac Hadjar competing throughout the feature race, and Jack Crawford also on the podium as well in the sprint, Luke. It was, a much better weekend for them, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was great for High Tech. It was good for Crawford to get the podium. And they've been a bit indifferent in the first 2 rounds, like in Bahrain and Saudi. But this weekend they took that bit of a step up. And good for the team morale as well to bring home a nice bit of silverware back to the factory. And they've got some good drivers further down the ladder as well, like Luke Browning and Alex Dunn. So if they make the progress towards Formula 2 with High Tech, they could be challenging for points and wins in the years to come. But more points in Baku, more points in throughout the summer as well. And they might find themselves in a good position come Abu Dhabi.
Yeah, for sure. Jack Crawford becomes the second youngest podium finisher in a Formula 2 race, by the way. 17 years and 344 days. The only driver who to have won a Formula 2 race younger than him is Théo Pourchaire in Monaco, the feature race 2021. Thanks to our statman Simone for that one. Luke, I did want to talk about Isaac Hauger. There was an unsafe release, or a potential unsafe release, wasn't there, in the feature race? Isaac Hauger, or Hitech, letting Isaac Hauger out just in front of Ollie Bearman. They made contact in the pits, didn't they? Should that have been a penalty? Is a Hitech lucky to get away with that one?
Yes, they were. I was shocked it wasn't a penalty, to be honest. I mean, Bearman left the box before Hauger, and with the pit lane being so narrow, you can't run side by side. In that situation, Hauger's relying on the front jackman to let him go, and he let him go just a bit too early, and with Bearman getting the puncture as well, and it seems a bit strange for Bearman to be such a big punishment for something that was 0% his fault. And a similar thing happened in Formula 1 a couple of years ago as well, where at Monaco, where Verstappen hit Valtteri Bottas and he got a 5-second penalty. And it was sort of a similar situation over the weekend with Hauger and Bearman. So, yeah, there should have been a penalty, really.
Yeah, odd one, isn't it? Emily, why do you think the FIA didn't give a penalty for that? It does seem like there's still a little bit of inconsistency, doesn't there?
It's the same with motorsport in general. You know, you can say the same for F1, and I know I keep comparing it to F1, but there's no consistency there. And yeah, I completely agree with Luke. Like, there should have been a penalty there. If that had happened to anyone else or at any other point during that race, then that would have been a penalty. And, as we were speaking before, as soon as you saw it, Fraser, you said, oh, he's going to get a penalty for that. And then when it just doesn't come up, it seems very unfair to Ollie Bearman, obviously, in this case, that he suffered from that, and Hauger just, got away with it. So I think it's something that should have hopefully have been brought up maybe in the team meetings after the race, and hopefully they've put forward that to the FIA and said, what happened there, because these things can't just, if it's an unsafe release, it's not just the driver's fault, but it's the team's fault. Like you said, he's waiting for that guy at the front to release the jack and let him go. So hopefully there was mentions of that from other teams, and hopefully probably Prema did bring it up at some point. I'm sure they did. But yeah, I don't think it's fair that Ollie got, had what he had because of an accident that Hauger and his team created. Yeah, definitely. Really unfortunate for Ollie Bearman. Hopefully he catches some luck at some point this season, because he really has been unlucky in the first few rounds of the season, hasn't he? Théo Pourchaire, much better weekend for him after a difficult weekend in Jeddah. Kyle on Twitter says that Théo will need to push on, which is something that he didn't do after his 3 wins last season. Momentum will be an even bigger factor as the grid is closer together this season. Has Théo Pourchaire, has he reignited his championship hopes, Emily? I think so. I mean, obviously Jeddah was a really, really bad weekend for him. He messed up and he admitted to that. But I think, he's come back with a stronger and fresher perspective in Melbourne. Obviously, the drivers were all really excited because it was the first time that they'd ever got to race there before. So I think that probably really, fueled his drive for that weekend. And I think, he's got to find that drive inside him, which I know he has. He wants this championship. He lost out last year to Drugovic. So, he's going to keep pushing. But I feel like it was definitely a good step forward for him this weekend. And I feel like the next 10 rounds, we'll hopefully see some more from him. Yeah, definitely. Hopefully he pushes on. Jack Doohan, not the weekend he would have hoped for at home in front of his home fans. Ironically, his qualifying was incredibly strong last season. And this season, he just seems to be really struggling in qualifying on a Friday, which really impacts his weekend. A bit odd, because he was one of the best qualifiers last year.
Yeah, I think as well, on Friday, he was fastest in practice, and he looked very quick in the opening stages of quali. I think it was just he was so unlucky with the timing of the red flag this time round, and he qualified 17th. And when you have qualifyings like that, it makes your weekend pretty much impossible. It was just, if he hadn't have had that red flag at the end of qualifying, maybe he would have been a bit higher. And I think his weekend could have been completely different, because I do think he was the quickest driver on Friday.
He needs a good weekend in Baku, doesn't he? He needs it more than any other driver on the grid, I'd say. Luke, I want to talk about Richard Verschoor as well. Another great feature race, didn't he? He went from I can't remember what it was off the top of my head. I think was it P17 all the way up to P7 or P18 up to P7. He also went from P20 in Jeddah all the way up to P6. He just needs to sort his qualifying out, doesn't he? He could be absolutely mega if he starts inside the top 10 on a Sunday and a feature race, right?
Yeah, he was a really good driver, Richard Verschoor. P18 to P7 in the feature race, and some good points for the team. That's what he's there for with the team. A good, solid driver, loads of experience, and just to pick up good results like that.
Yeah, definitely. Hopefully he can have a better qualifying, and Jack Doohan can have better qualifyings next time out in Baku. Okay, let's take a look at the championship standings after round number 3. It's our feature race winner, Ayumu Iwasa, who leads the F2 Championship for the first time in his career. Teo Porcher remains in second. Frederick Vesti jumps up the standings to P3 after a strong feature race. A great weekend for Arthur Leclerc means that he moves into P5 in the standings and is the highest rookie in the championship. Kush Maini and Richard Verschoor round out the top 10. And the team standings? Dams are our new leaders after becoming the first team to win 2 races this season. ART and MP Motorsport are not too far behind. Carlin, Virtuosi and Hitech are all yet to win a race so far this season. They remain outside the top 5. PHM and Trident round out the team standings. Okay, that's all we got time for today. My thanks to Emily, to Jenny and to Luke for joining me on today's show. As mentioned at the start of the show, please do give us a follow or subscribe on your chosen podcast player. If you have enjoyed the show, make sure you give it a like and get involved in the conversation on our social media channels. We love hearing your thoughts and your opinions throughout the weekend. But from me, Fraser Ford, and all of us here at Inside F2, we'll see you next time.